Hello and welcome back to 7th Circle Gaming. Today on the channel we're going to be discussing, like the title wasn't a giveaway, Port Royale 4. Finally. I know this is one that we've promised for a long time, but we're finally getting around to it. It's a big game. So let's get started with full disclosure as always. Pause the video and read through these now. Let's move on because we're going to talk about Immersion. The game has earned 8.5 out of 15 for Immersion. This might not be accurate for all players, but it is accurate for a fair percentage of players, we assume. The game is going to attempt to pull players into the world, mostly with statistics focus, and that's going to go hand in hand with player agency, because players are going to be inspired to take ownership of their character and their trading empire that they're going to grow and run as they progress through the game. There are, as we previously alluded to, a large amount of facts and figures to examine in the game. Which city produces what and what city is the most advantageous to sell that same commodity in. The game is also going to attempt to immerse players into the world through presentation, and it's a fairly realistic game. The towns are all hex-based, as are the battle maps or battle arenas, and it all looks fairly much like what players who are familiar with pirate movies are going to expect this time period to look like. And just to show you a little bit more about what we're talking about, because that's one of the things that I like to do here, is we have a couple of screenshots to show off. The first of which is just a map of part of the Caribbean. You can see in the lower right the mini-map. It's going to display discovered cities and cities that are part of the faction that the player is playing as. Then there's the typical top screen, which shows currency and a couple of other icons. Next, we're going to show off the town map. As we said, this is hex-based with various bonuses incurred or disadvantages for building businesses and structures in certain locations. In addition, there is also the battle arenas, which are hex-based. Yes, players who have already played through the game will notice that this is the battle tutorial. This was not something that was especially set up for this, so don't take anything that's displayed on the screen with anything other than massive handfuls of salt. It's only there to illustrate what the battle arenas look like. So let's move on, and we're going to show off or discuss difficulty. And the game is earning a 4 out of 15 for difficulty. If you want to rewind the video and look again at that overall map interface, you can see kind of what we're talking about. In general, the user interface doesn't add to difficulty unnecessarily, although it does seem, and players might notice this, it does seem that some gameplay or some UI decisions were made for gameplay reasons to make it more difficult to do things or to force the player to be more considerate about their actions. So we can't necessarily say anything about that. The game can be completely mouse directed. On the other hand, only the sandbox mode, we were able to determine, has any kind of difficulty options. The campaign is all predetermined. So then, what's going to keep someone going back? How long are they going to want to play this game? That brings us to lasting appeal. The game has earned a 6 out of 15 for lasting appeal. There are only two ways to engage with the game, although they are broadly speaking very similar, whether it's campaign or free play. There is some downloadable content for it. It does seem like the development cycle is concluded, so don't expect anything new. There are a variety of starting factions and ways to create a character, that means starting professions, and they add in or have various bonuses and disadvantages to choosing one or the other. And the less said about that, the better. It is a simple game on the surface. It's easy to learn, difficult to master, much like chess. So 6 out of 15 is what it's getting for lasting appeal. Some players who are more into this sort of tycoon game will find it a bit higher, and I will admit, just with the subjectivity hat, that the game can be somewhat hypnotic, and one can just sort of let it run and blankly stare at it and watch. So, handfuls of salt with that last statement. So let's put our objective hats back on and finish up with final analysis. The game has earned an average score of 6.1 out of 15. Some players will find the gameplay repetitive and they will tire of the game once they realize the more experience. That's rather unkind. The more experience and the longer that they play through the game. It can be said that combat doesn't necessarily seem to be the point of the game. Accruing money, accruing in-game credits seems to be the majority of the point of the game. Some players will have to immerse themselves and force themselves to continue to play the game. Others will find it incredibly immersive from the start and will just spend hours and hours, in fact days on end, playing through this game. So that 6.1 is really for the average player. It's not necessarily for players who are fans of the genre already. So then, with that said, if you did make it all the way to the end of the video, thanks very much for doing so. I do appreciate that. This was the last of the pre-planned reviews, so please suggest the next game. Comment below, have you tried Port Royale? Do you think that, more importantly, do you think the downloadable content is really worth it to spend the money on? Is there a maximum price that you would say, if it's below this, buy the downloadable content. If not, forget it. Other way, that's all I've got to say about Port Royale 4.